Hello and welcome to From Mrs. to Me, a podcast where you'll be inspired by courageous stories of strength and resilience told by women just like you who have been through the upheaval of divorce. This is their journey from Mrs. to Me, finding their true identity and creating a bold, beautiful life. I'm Crissy Freeman and I'm your host, a certified life coach and divorced mother of two. Join me each week as we explore real stories of divorce and what it takes to transform and live in alignment with the real you. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the From Mrs. to Me podcast. I'm your host, Crissy Freeman. Today, my next guest, Cheryl Stelte, is a spiritual coach, master healer, speaker, best-selling author of 2 books, and CEO and founder of Star of Divine Light Institute and the Azarius Energy Healing Certification Program. As an energy healing and empowerment expert, she helps women who have done a lot of personal work and are aware of subconscious blocks, even deep traumas, have major breakthroughs so they can gain clarity and step into their greatness, peacefully powerful selves. With 30 years of experience and extensive training in numerous healing modalities, spiritual leadership, coaching, retreat guiding, shamanism, yoga, and meditation, nothing is more rewarding to her than helping women safely break through their subconscious blocks. Wow, there is a lot there. You have an amazing background. I can't wait for you to share more with the audience. Welcome, Cheryl.
Oh, thank you, Crissy. It just really is such an honor to be here with you.
Well, you yourself have shared with me that you have been divorced and have gone through the overwhelm and fears associated with ending a marriage. So as we talk about on this podcast, the transformation from Mrs. to Me, can you take us back and share a little bit about when you came to the realization that something needed to change and you needed to leave this marriage that you were in?
I go back to when I first realized I needed to change. My second child, my daughter, was 2, almost 3 at the time. And I remember telling my future sister-in-law that I would not stay married to my husband, that I knew I would leave him. And I just wasn't quite ready. It took 6 years.
Wow.
It was 6 years later. And I think back, oh gosh. And really what a step that is for most women. I think many of us I knew a long time before I was going to leave. And it was through her probing questions. She was studying to be a therapist. And so I think she was just asking helpful probing questions to help me see. And yet I wasn't ready to take that step. When I finally did, I was a very different woman. The situation had, just gotten worse. It never really got better.
And that's usually the case, right? It's, that is almost my story right there from what you just shared took me years. It's should I stay or should I go? Asking yourself all these questions when really we need to, stop the mind from all of the racing, all of the looking externally for the answers. And how great to have a sister who was training to be a therapist and asking you these questions, because that's really it, is really being able to tap into the truth. And the only way to do that is to really ask ourselves those questions, not somebody else to get the answer. So can you share a little bit more around the whole premise for this show is about the identity. I call it the sort of identity shift or identity crisis that we go through after divorce. And for so many reasons, right? We are identifying ourselves as a wife, as a mother, as all these other different roles within the family unit. And after divorce, it's sort of like, wow, who am I now? And the most important thing is that healing journey, right? And I think sometimes we're rushing to get to what's next. And so can you share with me what I refer to as sort of that healing path to rediscovery? What did that look like for you post divorce?
Did I ever have a healing path to rediscovery? And I'm still on it 30 years later.
I am as well. Yes.
Yes. And I think, one of the terms you used was an identity crisis, the identity crisis that we may experience after divorce. I think the identity crisis starts while we're still in the marriage. I realized I lost myself. I didn't know who I was anymore. Not that I knew who I was when we got married. I got married very young, and a couple of years later, I got pregnant, and it was the healing journey that was everything for me. I just feel so blessed. I am so grateful. I was raised Catholic, and I had stopped going to church for some time, but still believed in God. And after the divorce, I remember one day being in my car, and I was stopped at an intersection. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I was just overwhelmed with gratitude for my new life. And I couldn't name anything specifically. After we split up, for months, all I felt was relief. I didn't have to wake up to him. I didn't have him so much in my life. He was still in my life somewhat, but I had a very different life. And yet it was really a matter of discovery. And I remember moving to just profound tears of greatness for God, that I knew somehow God was helping me. I knew that my belief in that was beyond the shadow of a doubt. And it wasn't much later that I had a very profound spiritual experience one day on the beach on Vancouver Island. And I was guided to start meditating. And I did. And the long and the short of it, over 30 years later, I'm still meditating every day, and I learned to heal myself. I learned to heal myself, heal my past, do early childhood work through meditation. And that led me, you listed all my credentials, and there's more, multiple healing modalities. It led me to pretty much spend all my extra money on trainings to help myself to become a better person, to that journey of self-discovery. Who am I? And through that, I was so compelled all the time to help others. And so I remember before I left him, I stayed at a transition house, and later I volunteered at a transition house, cooking meals for women and trying to energetically be a support. And I later went back to school. I was guided to go back to school, and became an interior designer. And then I realized through my business, it was a real opportunity to empower women. And so I took women with very little or no skills and taught them how to sew. We made draperies. I had a workroom, throw cushions, that sort of thing, and also how to paint. I had an all-women paint team. And so my life has been so much about empowering women, whatever I can do, because I felt so powerless. I felt so disempowered. And it was that journey of self-discovery was finding my own inner power and really divine power moving through me. I believe we are all vessels for the one love, God, universe, source, and how to move into that and step into, when I say step into your greatest self, it's beyond human form. We're all so much more.
Yes. Oh, yes. And, one of the things I want to talk about is meditation, because there are so many different self-love healing tools that we can use. And, people talk about them all the time, but I hear so often from people, I can't meditate. I try and I can't. And, for me, I started with guided meditations and, a few other things. But what tips or how did you get meditation to really work for you, to really go in? And how do you guide people so that, they get out of the mind story and they don't try so hard? I think a lot of people are just trying so hard and they're like, I need to meditate. And then the mind is going crazy and you're not able to drop into that place. So, with your experience with meditation, can you tell people just a little bit about, how they can access that space?
Yes, definitely. Um, the first meditation class that I did, we were just to focus on the breath as it went into the nose and out of the nose, and even on your upper lip, if you had any kind of physical sensation. So it's that focal point, being focused right here, and then to keep coming back to that. I can't tell you how often I hear people say, I can't meditate, I can't get rid of all the thoughts. And many of us associate meditation with mindfulness meditation. And I've been there, done that. And I find that if we want to really heal ourselves, if we want to clear those subconscious blocks that we don't even know, we can't even identify that are in us, we need to go deeper than that. So the number one thing is when you sit to meditate is breathe fully with your lower abdomen. And what that does, it shifts the brain. So one of the things when we're not breathing fully, when we do, and not to poo-poo mindfulness, all forms of meditation are beneficial. I like to get the biggest bang for my buck with whatever I'm doing. How can I get more out of this? How can this really help me? And so early on, I started noticing emotions arising. And that's where most of us, if we've experienced emotional neglect, and all my clients have experienced emotional neglect, where they didn't have a good resource as a child to help them process emotions. So notice if you want to move away from an emotion. As soon as you want to stop meditating, that's a good indicator that something's coming up for you and you want to move into it. You want to dive in. So as soon as we feel frustration, discomfort, sink into that and breathe into it. What does it really feel like? Because subconscious blocks are emotions that have not been processed. They're stuck emotions in the subconscious. So the more we learn to do that and the more we learn to process our daily emotions and allow them to just move through us, they are energy. Emotions are energy in motion. And so what happens with the brain when we're breathing fully, and I learned this early on, but I didn't understand the science of it until way later. I noticed, so my teacher had said to breathe with a normal breath. But what I noticed, somehow I went deeper when I breathed with really long breaths. And so how did I know to use long breaths? Well, when I was a kid, I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, where it was really cold in the winter. And so it would often be minus 20, minus 30, freezing outside. And I had to walk to school 6 blocks. And if I wanted to go see a friend, go to my swimming lessons. So I learned when I would be shivering, I learned that if I breathed fully, took really long breaths, my body would calm and I'd be a little bit warmer.
Yes, I live in Maine, so I know what that is all about.
And so I learned that. And so I think when I started meditating, I started doing that automatically because I would notice the tension in my body when these emotions wanted to surface. And so I started breathing fully. Well, what that does, when we engage the abdominal muscles, when we're breathing, it changes the brain function. So as we're sitting here talking right now, we're breathing from the back part of the brain, the medulla oblongata. When we engage the abdominal muscles and take long, full, deep breaths, it changes to the frontal lobal brain and it frees up the back brain, which gives us access to the subconscious, the right brain. So we often think trauma we have the memories. And when we have trauma, it's imprinted. Science has proven it's imprinted in the right side of the brain, which is the subconscious. No linear memories in there. All our linear memories are in the left mental brain, the left brain. The memories that we have in the subconscious are fragmented. So that's often why when people have experienced sexual abuse, all sorts of traumas, they don't have the same cognitive memories that you have of, say, us doing this podcast. I might go to bed tonight and go, oh, it was so great to talk with Crissy, and then run through the memory. So the other thing that's imprinted in that trauma are the emotions and physical sensations. So when you're meditating, so this is, I'm sorry, a long-winded answer.
No, this is so great. Yes.
Breathe fully. Notice any physical sensations. Notice those, breathe into them. Notice any emotions, especially uncomfortable emotions. If we're feeling unsafe, if we're feeling fear, if we're feeling anger, breathe into it. And that's how you're going to feel better, because it processes the emotion. It moves the energy. And then you move into, you'll naturally have other emotions that will want to come through. And for a focal point, if you want a focal point, I recommend focusing on the root chakra, which is one of our energy centers. And that's at the tip of the tailbone. And that's where the majority of the work really takes place. It used to be years ago, and still is very popular today, to meditate in the third eye, meditate upward, which takes us out of our bodies. And so we want to be in the root chakra and develop that first chakra and the lower chakras before we move into other areas. Yeah. And so it's incredibly healing and empowering.
Yes. And thank you so much, first of all, for going into all of that, because I'm sure there are a lot of listeners out there who are saying, I want to do this, but I don't know how. And so it's taken so much time and practice for me. And I still struggle. There's still days where the mind is just racing too much and I can't drop in. But I think there is something about really going in and getting in touch with our body, getting in touch with the sensations in our body, so that we can start to recognize I believe our body is speaking to us all the time. And it's telling us things. And when you start to recognize that and you get used to that, that's when you can actually see things like the intuition and other ways in which it's speaking to us. And so that's why I think meditation is so beautiful, because it teaches us how to tap into those feelings that we're having in our body and really breathe into them. So it's almost like you're quieting the mind, but you're also accessing so much that is going on a regular basis in our bodies.
Exactly. I love what you're saying. It's so true. And so if we have a regular meditation practice and we're used to feeling those physical sensations, and we're used to feeling the emotions, then when we are in our daily lives, we can respond to people, situations, places, things more appropriately. And so we're used to that, where we can go, oh, I'm experiencing some burning in my gut. What is that about? Oh, and then we can prompt ourselves to feel into the emotion. Oh, what is it? And then, so we don't react, we respond. Instead, we're in tune with ourselves on every level.
Yes. So this work that you do is so needed, and you obviously have had a lot of experience in this area. But one of the things I would love to ask that comes up a lot is from women after divorce and in just making change in general in your life, is trying to find sort of your passion and pursuing that passion. And you do this beautiful work. And what I would love for you to share with the audience is, how did you discover that this was what you wanted to do? And not only discover it, really have the courage to pursue it.
That is, boy, you have no idea how loaded those questions are. How did I discover this as my work? For years, I was told by friends, other people, you're a healer, you're a spiritual teacher. And because I was doing all this spiritual work for myself, it was such a big part of my life. And I just always thought, it's enough to do it for myself, let alone to help others. And yet I got so much joy out of helping others. So, I started leading some meditation classes. I didn't charge. And it was just the sheer joy of it to share what I was doing with others. And then I went back to school and I studied interior design. And I started a spiritual interior design business. And so I could not call myself a spiritual teacher. And that's the second question that you ask, how did you step into this? I did it gradually. So I could be an interior designer, a spiritual interior designer, and I could do spiritual work under that shingle through that business. But later on, I ended up knowing I received the guidance through people that I really needed to step into this work full time. I received it. I did 2 or 3 different retreats and got the same guidance. You're a spiritual teacher, a spiritual leader. You need to do this work full time. And I would just have a meltdown. And all my stuff around not being good enough, unworthy, all stuff came up. And it was almost debilitating. And I actually became sick. And at that time, I had gone back to school once again to study fashion design. And so I thought, oh, maybe I can meld the two. But that was not what was meant to be. And it was when I really decided, okay, I don't know how this is going to look. I'm stepping into this full time. And I had faced all the fears and the subconscious blocks, just there's deeper and deeper and deeper layers. I'm still doing this work. And it was when I embraced doing the work that I was meant to do in this world that I just reached a level of personal fulfillment that I couldn't even imagine earlier, a level of joy, fulfillment, and gratitude. So it was not easy. It was a real challenge for me. And so, that led me to write my first book. And then my second book, etc. And now I have a spiritual school. Never imagined. So one of the things I say to people is when you clear your blocks, you will move into the currently unimaginable you. You cannot imagine who you really are and what you're meant to do because you're blocked. You have blinders on.
Yeah.
You may have some ideas.
Yes. And, you said a couple of things that I want to highlight, but one is you talked about the sheer joy of it. So what you are doing is you are accessing something that is a gift of yours and that gives you joy. And so the problem is when our mind comes in and starts telling us all the reasons why we can't do it. And then that's the fear story. And so it's one of the things I talk about on this podcast all the time is that the only way for us to change is to truly lean into the discomfort of it all because it's not comfortable. But we all have these gifts. And it doesn't even have to be something that you pursue as your career necessarily. It could be a hobby. It could be something else. But it's that newness of whatever it is that it's actually stepping into who we really are and embracing that. But because it looks different, and it's now new to us in the outside world, that's when that whole story comes in of, how could I ever do this? The imposter syndrome, can't make enough money, you name it, comes into play. And so, I love that, it was such a journey for you of really discovery and looking at, first of all, listening to what people were telling you was your gift. And then, second of all, trying something else and realizing, ugh, this is just not it. I have to do this. Like, I don't have an option here. And listening to that and then taking that leap, which is that discomfort at first. And then I'm sure it opened wide and all of these beautiful things happened, like your 2 books and your school and all of the other business and all the other things that you're doing. So thank you for sharing that. You've been talking off and on about these subconscious blocks, and you talk in your bio too about breaking through them. So can you tell the audience more about the importance of this as part of the healing process through trauma or whatever else, you might be, because we're all holding on to things, right? And so if you could share about the importance of that.
Oh, it's vital. To me, it is just so vital. You can do all the mindset work you want, and you can do all the affirmations in the world from the level of the mind, and it will not fully get you to where you want to go. And I know a lot of people have success with that. If you're going to do that type of work, I encourage you to feel the emotions. Emotions will help you get there. So that's why I loved what you said about, our purpose, what we're really here to do. And it doesn't have to be a career. It can be raising children. Maybe we're meant to have a whole bunch of children, and motherhood and that unconditional love, whatever it is. It's a feeling. It's a feeling. And so there's 3 steps to healing and empowerment, the 3 basic steps. And one is, I've already talked about learning to access those subconscious blocks. And so I'm going to refer to this as the ACE method, ACE. So easy to remember. Think of an ace of spades. So A is for access. And so it's breathing fully, having a focal point, meditating, finding the emotions, finding the physical sensations. What is it? And then we clear those subconscious blocks. How do we do that? So let's say I'm meditating, and let's just talk about when I discovered that I'm a spiritual leader and I was in so much resistance. And when I tuned into that, all I could hear my father saying, "Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are?" I remember when I went back to school to be an interior designer, and I told my dad I was going to school, and he said, "Nobody's going to pay you to do that." And the same, "Who do you think you are?"
Right.
So here's this. And that was him doing his best. He thought he was saving me by saying, "Don't do that.
Of course.
You're going to be broke," right? He really did love me. And so feeling it. So what I was able to do, so there was that. And then I sunk into that and breathed into that. And then what are the underlying emotions? Feeling imposter syndrome. That's not really a feeling, but feeling not good enough, feeling unworthy. I felt unworthy. I felt unimportant. I wasn't important enough to do that. So breathing into those emotions, so staying in them is the clearing while breathing fully. If you stop breathing and you tense your body, you are going to re-traumatize and lock those emotions in again. So that's why this is so important. So when people are meditating and like you said, they go, "Oh, my mind is racing. I can't stop." And they get that tension. You're locking in more of that. Breathe. Keep checking in with the breath. Relax your shoulders. That changes your nervous system, right? And so there's so much more to that. That's basically it. But the more advanced thing to do would be to ask yourself, when did this emotional pattern first begin? And let yourself sink back into early childhood, even being a toddler, a baby, even a fetus in the womb. A lot of our wounds begin when we're in the womb. We take on the mother's emotions. We are aware of our environment. Fetuses feel. Science has proven that. So it's learning to feel, when did that emotional pattern first begin, that's the response we go into. And your subconscious will let you know if you let it. Your subconscious will let you know. And so then you can imagine that you're that younger child, you're that baby, you're that fetus, and you keep breathing into it and it clears it. You can also reparent yourself. And then new emotions will come in. So you can even feel the love of God. You can connect with angels. I can list you 50 methods to do deeper clearing, but that's basically it. And then the next level is empowerment. And when I first started doing this work, I didn't figure out the empowerment. It kind of happens naturally where new emotions will flow through you, more positive, more joyful emotions. But to actually tune into then the new emotions that your younger self is feeling, and what are the new subconscious beliefs that are associated with those emotions. And so it's sort of, when it comes to purpose and what we're really here to do, we go through this ACE method. That's at the deepest level, soul purpose. And then it's like, who am I not to do this?
Yes.
This motivation, and we're inspired, and we've got to take action. And then we move into inspired action naturally. And doing this work, empowerment, I can be in one meditation, it can be really extreme where I'm really down in the dumps, feeling sad, disappointed, fearful. And at the end of the meditation, I'm higher than a kite and so inspired that I actually can even start dancing through the energy flow.
Yes. And this happened to me recently where I was in this mind story. I was getting stuck in feeling like I needed to move. Like my body just wanted to move. And it was almost like this avoidance of what I didn't want to see. And it was causing more stress because I could not get out of my mind. And it wasn't until, and I know all of these tools, right? But it wasn't until I said to myself, finally, okay, I noticed, okay, these are thoughts. These are thoughts. There's nothing else. Everything else here is okay. I'm standing here in my living room. There's nothing wrong in this moment, but I need to access those mindfulness tools, and I need to sit down and I need to access my breath. Because it's when you are anxious, you are holding your breath, and it's not allowing anything to help in that moment. It's, and so, but again, like this is work. And so that's, the other thing I want to say is it's a constant practice. It's reminding yourself of these tools, the ACE that you just outlined, it's keeping that in the forefront of your mind and knowing when these things come up that this is what you need to do and how you need to using those tools to access what is true in that moment. And so I love the work that you're doing. And, I think, would you say for this, accessing or working through these subconscious blocks, would you say everyone has them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's part of being human. I don't believe any human being escapes trauma of some sort. And most of us go through a period in our lives, especially when we're younger, we might think, I had the greatest parents. I had a great childhood. There are things that we don't want to see. So wherever we're having challenges, trouble in our lives today, there's a pattern that began early on. And it's really accessing those. And I'm also really grateful. I do a lot of chakra readings for people. So I've developed the capacity. It was not a gift I was born with, where I can sit across from somebody online, do a chakra reading, and let them know where their blocks are. I see the blocks as black, as dark energy, where they're light. We are light beings. Kirlian photography has proven we're energetic, we are light. And I can see where the light is flowing well, what people's superpowers are. I have never met a person,
Wow,
pure light. I have met some healers, people who have done a lot of personal work on themselves. I mean, tons for decades, and have helped others. And so they have a lot of light, and there's always something they're missing. And that's why they want a reading from me. And I remember doing a reading on a woman. She was a psychic. She had a lot of light, but behind her sacral chakra, way out behind her, she had pushed out a wound that she knew she had. It was around sexual abuse in early childhood, and she just did not want to face it. And so I called it. She said, "You're absolutely right. I don't want to face it. I have pushed it. I didn't realize I pushed it way back there, but I have avoided that for decades. And so now I understand I have to face that,
Oh, wow.
a challenge. And this woman,
And that's why this work is so needed. And so, one of as a mom, we have a lot of listeners here who have children, they're single moms. I hear a lot, how do I even make time for this stuff? How do I, as a mom, my job is to take care of my kids, is to make sure that they're okay. And so what tends to happen is we as women and moms put ourselves last, right? And it wasn't until for me, I learned that by modeling some of these behaviors of putting myself first, I was giving my children this great gift that they would be able to hopefully access as they get older. So can you share, after your divorce, how did you go through that process of sort of, recognizing that you can still be a good mom and also pursue your passion, also make your self-care a priority? How did you do that for your children?
Thank you. That is such an important question. And I think all single moms face this. We are conditioned. I mean, the patriarchy and I like men. Don't think I'm against men. I'm happily married now, but we have all this all these generational patterns that we bring into our lives. It's modeled in families, where the husband comes first, and the woman, like you said, puts all the children and everyone else first. She comes last. And I have to say, I'm so encouraged by young people today, men and women, and I see fathers stepping in more, and women, we're mixing the roles up, right? And that parenthood and paying attention to the children in different ways we're really evolving. We are evolving humans in that respect. And so modeling to the children, it's easier. My kids were older, and when I started meditating, I couldn't do it first thing in the morning for about 5 years. I would do it before I would make dinner. So I'd come home from work. Before I made dinner, I had 15 minutes to myself. And I would say to my kids, I'm going to make dinner. And sometimes I might be putting something in the oven and then, get things rolling, right? Be organized. And they would interrupt me. They would interrupt me. And so I would say, I'm letting you know, this is my time for me. I need this 15 minutes every day. This is my time.
Love that.
Yeah. And so that was modeled. And when I did meditate for longer periods on the weekends, I remember my kids being teenagers, and I remember my daughter having a bunch of friends over, and I was meditating in my room. I had this little sitting room off my bedroom, and they quietly came and opened the door, and they came in and they're all watching me. And then some of them started giggling. And
that's fantastic.
And they're, kind of, oh, look what she's doing. She's so weird. Kind of, they're giggling.
Right, of course.
And I kept my eyes closed, and I said, I hear you. I'm interrupted. I'm feeling interrupted, whatever it was. And they closed the door and it never happened again.
Oh,
And so
wow.
children will test our boundaries. Children
Yes.
test our boundaries. But then what I noticed, if my son was in his room and he was doing something specific, they would set the same boundary. I'm taking this time for me. I remember they both started doing their own laundry, and I did some of my son's laundry once because I didn't have a full load. He was 13, and he came to me and he said, Mom, I don't want you doing my laundry. I'll take care of all my laundry myself. And it was learning, it's a healthy boundary.
Yes.
With him saying, I mean, what a great guy. He was doing his own laundry. Yay.
At 13. How amazing is that?
Yeah. And so it's finding a way. And even with respect to honoring our emotions, if we're meditating, if we're setting that time for ourselves, and if we have small kids, let's face it, you have to get up before them.
Yes.
And it's just too hard to meditate well after they've gone to bed when you're tired. So you can do that practice. And I love all these fridge magnets available with emotions, with the names of the emotions. So with the moms I work with, I encourage them to get some of those and to talk about their emotions. Or if a child is upset, oh, how are you feeling right now? You sound frustrated. Are you feeling frustrated? Are you angry? Are you sad? What is it? And to also acknowledge when they're feeling happy and joyful. What does that feel like in your body?
Oh, I love that. That is so
And so
great.
teaching emotional intelligence at an early age, we have to learn it ourselves first. And emotional intelligence is energetic intelligence. So, like when you talked about standing in the middle of the living room and you can't think properly, that's because you've moved from the frontal cortex into your midbrain, right? You're in
Yeah.
fight, flight, freeze, fawn. You're not functioning well. You're not thinking clearly. And so then the full breath brings us back. Oh, so if all kids learn to breathe into their emotions in the moment, we would all be clear beings.
Yes. And I love how you said that you tell these moms about talking to their kids about their emotions and how that feels in their body. Oh man, I wish I had done that with my kids when they were little. Like that, what a gift to give them to be able to learn that at such a young age. And so I hope some young moms of young children out there are listening, because that is such a great idea to do with your children at a young age, and to start really getting them to access those emotions, articulate them, and feel them. Like, wow, how beautiful is that? So I love that. Well, I feel like we could talk for a very long time. But I always like to end my podcast about authenticity. I always ask my guests, when we talk about what does it mean to be authentic, because that's one of the things is when we're really talking about accessing our truth and moving forward in the world with, who we really are outside of all these costumes and roles that we play. I like to ask guests, what does being authentic mean to you?
Oh, it's such a great question. It's so much about the throat chakra.
Okay, great.
And so being authentic is really about, yes, it's speaking our truth, not at the expense of someone else, or speaking our truth so that we're actually heard. And sometimes we may want to speak our truth to someone who is just not going to hear it. Don't throw your energy away. Don't even bother. Choose to speak your truth to people who are willing to really listen and to really be authentic. And number one, being authentic with yourself, to know that, I'm saying these things to this person. They're not hearing me. They don't understand me. And then to be authentic with oneself. I don't have to do that. It's okay. Choosing who we're our most authentic self. And then also in this world, you're being authentic by doing this podcast, that there's often fear around speaking our truth, whether it's our emotions, our purpose in life. The throat chakra is so much about expressing our soul's purpose at the highest level, and to just breathe through the fear when that comes through. And if you're speaking publicly, doing an online video, or even writing a post, anything like that, trust that your message will get out to those who need to hear you. And the ones that don't need to hear it will either ignore it or they will just toss it aside. And that's actually ideal.
Yes. Speak your truth. And that is something that, let me tell you, I've struggled with. And that was one of the reasons I did this podcast, is because I feel as though we all have a story to tell. And I wanted a platform for women to be able to tell that, to share their truth without a filter. And that's what's so beautiful, is we all have different journeys and we all have beautiful gifts to give to the world. But when we keep them inside, we are not only letting down ourselves, we're letting down the universe, so many other things that are supposed to be. And so thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your wisdom and the wonderful work that you're doing. It is so needed. And if our audience wants to connect with you, learn more about the work you're doing, your books that are behind you, can you tell me how, or the best way to access or get in touch with you or find your information?
Yes, the best way is starofdivinelight.com. That's the easiest way. So you'll find me on there. There is a link there to access my ACE method. So that's a free ebook downloadable that you can use to start to do this work. I highly recommend it. starofdivinelight.com. If you want to book a call with me, that's free as well. There's a link in there for a discovery call if you're interested in working with me. Or maybe you want a chakra reading. You just want to know, where are your blocks? What are they about? And what are your superpowers?
Great. And that will be included in the show notes as well. But thank you for sharing that, in case if those are listening, want to write it down right away and reach out. And for those of you listening, also, if you are interested in joining the From Mrs. to Me community, you can find us on Facebook at From Mrs. to Me, Rediscovering You After Divorce, where you will find tools, resources, and information on my upcoming retreat this fall. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please give a review and subscribe so we can keep this going. And as I always say, you can't pour from an empty cup. So keep doing that inner work on yourself. And thank you, Cheryl, for being here today.
Thank you, Crissy, for doing all that you're doing in the world.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of From Mrs. to Me, real life stories of real women and their journey of transformation after divorce. I'm Crissy Freeman, and if you like this episode, please drop a review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Do you have a story to share? Are you ready to inspire other women on their journey through divorce? If so, find me on Instagram at From Mrs. to Me. For more tools and resources on creating your path to transformation after divorce, follow my community on Facebook, From Mrs. to Me, Rediscovering You After Divorce.